visited Great Smoky Mountains National Park near Gatlinburg, Tennessee, 7 times between 2006 and 2023. If you would like to get notices when I post again, be sure to subscribe right here. Just click on that button. This is the 522,427 acres that this park covers. It was established on June the 15th, 1934. And these are the dates that we visited it. There are many different places to visit as you come to this park, and we're going to cover most of it in those 7 trips, sometimes only once in the 7. We'll be staying mostly in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. We'll drive along the Little River several different times, and then along Laurel Creek as we are going to Cades Cove, where we're going to spend a lot of time. We'll go around it 20 or 30 times, probably, or more. We'll drive along the Rich Mountain Road. There's only one highway that goes through the entire park, and that's US 441 that cuts across from Tennessee to North Carolina. As we go across it, we'll see Newfound Gap, and we'll also drive out and go up Clingman's Dome. Then we'll go over to the Roaring Forks Motor Nature Trail. And lastly, we'll go look at Chattahoochee. And then we'll list all the animals that we have seen while we are there. Let's get started. Leaving Gatlinburg, you drive almost immediately into Great Smoky Mountains National Park. We'll be driving through forests most of the time, going to Cades Cove. It's about a 2-hour drive, so we have to get up real early in the morning to get there. The roads follow the creeks mainly, and sometimes go through the mountains themselves. First, we'll be driving along the Little River. It cuts a good path through the mountains so that the road can follow it. It has been raining rather a lot lately, and so the Little River is pretty full right now and has a lot of waterfalls in it. We'll be stopping at a place called the Sinks in the Little River. It's a waterfall that's spectacular. The river here makes a right turn, and so it is very viewable. Now we'll be driving along Laurel Creek as we head on up into Cades Cove, going up mountain now. We are now entering Cades Cove. This will be the sum of probably 30 or 40 trips around that area, the 11-mile loop. We'll be spending almost half of our time every one of our trips here. It's a very important place up in the northern section of the park. It was a community at one time here, and then when the park was built, the people were moved out, and it makes a very good place for looking for wildlife because of the openness. It was opened in 1819 by the Cherokee Nation for people to move in here. It was basically a farming community with many different families farming here, and sometimes they were making liquid corn also. By the time the National Park was formed, about 100 families lived here, and they were all moved out in order to farm the park. These people have been coming here for a long time to look at the animals, and Deborah doesn't like not feeding and not touching. We'll be following the 11-mile loop trail around the park, but we'll also cut across it on the two side roads. And we'll look at most of the buildings as we go. In the early morning, there's a lot of fog. Traffic is often bumper to bumper here because it's a one-way road and people drive really slow looking around. Sometimes hard to see things in the early morning though with the fog. It's a combination of forested areas and open fields. This is why it makes it good for looking for wildlife, because you can see so far on the open fields. Deer could be just 5 feet from you in the forest and you never see it, but in an open field you will. As said, traffic is often bumper to bumper, and then they all stop. They're probably looking at a bear or a deer. We call this a bear jam. Soon the fog is starting to burn off, and you can see the fields, and soon we'll be able to see the mountains also. As we go around, we see many stump bears, we call them. See in front of us that black blob looks almost like a bear in the grass, but it's a tree trunk. We have a lot of false calls sometimes. The valley is surrounded by the Smoky Mountains, and as the fog is lifted, you can see them all the way around us. And it also has several streams flowing through it. The first place we'll look at is the Cable Mill area. This is the visitor center for Cades Cove. This is a created community that was self-sufficient, but they brought in all these buildings from outside. The only original building here is the cable mill that was here. The Gregg Cable House was brought in. Notice the wood shingles on top of it. It was built in 1879, and then bought by Rebecca Cable and her brother Dan in 1887, where she farmed for many years. She never married and owned 600 acres. In fact, she farmed till she was 96 years old in 1940. This is their smokehouse that they would have used. They'd have kept corn in this crib. Notice it's off the ground. And this is the double stall barn that they used. Remember, all of these buildings were moved in here later. The cable mill itself is the only original building, as we said. This sluice would pour water over a water wheel, which would then turn the grinding stone to grind the wheat into flour. It's not operating right this minute, but there was a day when we were here that it was operating. Here we can see the water turning the water wheel, and inside we can see the grist mill spinning around and driving the grinding stones where you would pour into wheat and it would be ground to flour. And here are some of the samples of the products you could get out. Down at the visitor center, they're grinding some sugar cane and making molasses. As you can see here, the cooker that they have.
That was track number 1 from the album The Almanac by Shira Kamen from Magnitude.
Now it's time to look around the area a little bit more. First we go over and see the cantilever barn. And then we go look at the blacksmith shop where they would have made things. And now it's time to leave the Cable Mills Visitor Center and go look at other places. First, John Oliver's cabin. Then we'll go look at the Elijah Oliver place. It was almost a 2-story cabin in that they had a basement in it. And they had several barns and things in the area. Now we look at the Henry Whitehead place. The Dan Lawson place had many buildings there. It shows you more what the whole farm would have looked like, not just a house. Then we go to the Tipton place. It's even more buildings here. Barns, places for keeping animals, for corn cribs, and so many other things that you would find here on a typical farm, including the house. Next we go to the Carter Shields cabin. Next we'll be going to look at churches. There are 3 churches in the area. First we'll look at the Methodist Church. It has a very interesting cemetery. Note here that in 2003 they buried somebody. That's after they sold them to the park, so it's being used. And here's a man who lost a son in 1916, 17, and 18. And here's a man, they're not even sure when he died, about 75 years old. And now look inside. Next up is the Missionary Baptist Church, not too far off. And then we go to the Primitive Baptist Church. It also has an interesting cemetery with many old grave markers. And Here's a man that was murdered by North Carolina rebels. These churches have been here for a long time. Now let's look around the Cades Cove just a little bit more, driving around the loop. There are two roads that go across from side to side on the loop road. The first one we'll be taking is the Hyatt lane. It's good to be able to get off the beaten path and away from the traffic. One of the beautiful things in the morning is how the dew is on the spider webs. Next we'll be getting off onto Sparks Road, which is another one of the crossroads that run across the valley. Sparks Road has several water crossings where the water flows over the road when the creeks are high. We'll next be taking the Rich Mountain Road. It's a one-way road going out of the park. We'll be coming back to the park later. It's going to have some spectacular views back over Cades Cove as you go up into the mountains and look back into it. And over there, that's the Primitive Baptist Church we were at earlier. Next we'll be taking U.S. Highway 441, the only way through the park from Tennessee to North Carolina, and stopping at Newfound Gap, which is the border between North Carolina and Tennessee, and also where the Appalachian Trail runs through. Now it's time to take a side trip to Clingman's Dome, where we have a beautiful overlook across much of the park. Unfortunately, it's so foggy we can't see hardly anything from the raised viewpoint. And now we go through Newfound Gap. Next, we'll be taking Roaring Forks Motor Nature Trail. First, we're on Cherokee Orchard Road, and then we're on Roaring Forks Motor Nature Trail. This is what it looked like before it was developed. Cherokee Orchard Road starts off as a two-way road, but soon becomes a one-way loop. And then we'll be turning off on Roaring Forks Motor Nature Trail, and we'll follow it until we get back to Gatlinburg, which is a ways off, as you can see, about 6 miles before we get to the end of this. It's very narrow and hard to negotiate with trailers and motor vehicles sometimes. And it's very up and down hill. I speeded this up 10x so that we could see more of it. We drove extremely slowly, almost in first gear the whole time, looking for animals, but it's hard to see in these forests. Many people go out hiking on this road, so you have to be careful as you drive along. We have been following the Roaring Forks River. We stopped to look around at Jim Bell's place along the river. And now it's time to leave the park and enter back into Gatlinburg at Eli's Mill. The last section of the park that we'll look at is Chattahoochee. Like Cades Cove, it was a community that people lived in, and there are many farms in this valley also. We're going to look at a few of those. The Palmer Place was built in 1860. Most people come to the park to look at the animals. We're going to look at a domesticated animal first. They're riding horses, and also they're here to pull wagons when needed. And Deborah loves to harass the horses and touch when she can. Next up are the white-tailed deer. They're everywhere. And you just top a hill and there's two more. They're not very shy at all. They'll walk right across in front of your car. Doesn't matter if they're out in the woods or in a field or right beside the road. They just don't seem to mind people being around. I guess it's because there's no hunting here. have a buck just starting to grow its antlers, still in velvet. A few of them are rather shy and will take off running when they see you, and this one ran all the way across the road. And in the open field outside the visitor center, there's a 10-point buck just sitting there. Later he'll get up and go do a little grazing. Doesn't seem to mind us being there at all. There are several bucks in the field when we come by the next time, and we've been told that some of them were fighting each other earlier since it is the rut season. During the fall, which is rutting season, it's not unusual to see some of the bucks fighting with each other, as these two are right here. Obviously, the smaller buck on the right is at a huge disadvantage and will eventually just give up. Note that this buck is starting to grow its antlers and has velvet, but the antler on its left side seems to be two-pronged, kind of abnormal in some way. And here's one you can just reach out and touch if you wanted to, but you're not supposed to touch. These two fawns seem to have the zoomies, and they love chasing each other, just running through the field. And now it's time to move to the wild turkeys that are out here also. Here we have a turkey and some chicks. Look in the grass behind the turkey and in front of it, and you'll see the babies moving through the grass. That's about 5 chicks with it. These turkeys down near the horse barns are strutting their stuff during the spring. But to be honest, the females are just feeding. They could care less what they're doing. And here's another turkey just strutting itself out in the middle of the field. We now move to the elk. That's what we went over to Chattahoochee to see, because the elk were in their breeding season and they were magnificent. They would come out in the late evening and bugle for their mates. We saw coyotes just one time. This one coyote, he was actually down by the visitor center and just walking in an open field in the middle of the day with thousands of cars driving through. It was obviously a female, and she has probably some pups. It looks like they have been nursing. They have been moving into the park recently, the rangers tell me, since we first started going. We heard them calling several times during the early mornings, but never saw them, just this one. And of course, everybody comes to see the black bears for our first bear jam of the day that we had just outside the park. It's a mother bear and a couple of cubs up a tree. Black bears are considered to be arboreal, which means they live in trees. You can see this female here. She's gathering acorns from up at the top of a oak tree. Watch as I pan down this tree from where she is and her two cubs to see it's almost 3 stories up in the air. And she doesn't seem to mind at all. Yes, black bears do walk on the ground also. They do both. But you many times have to look up in order to see them. They also seem to ignore the traffic like the deer and the elk and the turkey do, and just walk right across the road in front of cars and don't seem to mind at all. Everybody stops for them. Although black bears are considered to be omnivorous, they still eat mainly herbivorous things like grass and leaves and berries and things like this. They very rarely eat any meat, and that's mainly insects. They don't pose a danger to the deer at all. This one's fairly close to the road and lets people get even closer. Deborah, I don't think that's 50 feet. But some even get closer to the bears, not realizing these are wild animals and can attack at any time. Here we find a mother and 3 cubs just lazied around in a tree. And this is a male called a boar. He's out by himself, but very big. And here's a mother and 3 yearling cubs out feeding in the grass, just like cows would. This has a mowed area down the middle, and the cubs are kind of scared of that mowed area. It almost looks like they have to run across it or are really scared to go across it without mother. Often the bears will stand on their hind legs and look around so they can get a better view from higher up. And something has scared these cubs. They're hightailing it for the woods. And so's Mom. The cubs like to play fight to earn their position among all the bears in the park. Some of you may think that we have special powers finding bears and animals because we see so many. But you need to realize we make 30 or 40 trips around the park to see all of these, around the loop at Cades Cove, and honestly, in a day, we'll make 3 or 4 trips around. We're constantly looking for bears and animals that we can find. And usually we find them in bear jams where other people have seen them, and all we do is park and walk out and look at them. Sometimes it's just a timing thing. Here we see cars parked, and there goes a bear across the road. 30 seconds earlier or 30 seconds later, and you've never seen that bear. And now as we look at this bear, this is going to bring us to the ends of our trips to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And this ends this video.